Mm-hmm.
and before you decide to marry someone, to say like, this is what I envision this looking like. Is that something that is compatible with your vision or
Mm-hmm.
whatever? Because again, basically, the nature of what I do, I'm a divorce lawyer, is seeing a lot of situations where I'm like, how did you end up in a relationship with each other? Like, you
Mm-hmm.
two? That doesn't make sense. And I think that's what I think, again, I think is admirable about you, because you've said before, you had what you were looking for in your wife. You met the one who checked those boxes. I feel like a lot of people don't actually do that, and they just sort of fall
No.
in. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think people just sort of fall into relationships. And they stay together for a certain amount of time. All of a sudden they're like, I guess we should get married. I don't know. And that's why you see such a high divorce rate.
What is up, everybody? My name is Kyle Matovcik. I am the host of the In Liberty and Health podcast, where we talk all things liberty, health, and wellness, and beyond. My hope is to encourage and spread the message of liberty and physical and mental well-being. I hope you enjoy all the topics we talk about with our guests. We're on all major streaming platforms, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Man, I'm doing as good as anyone can do, getting buried by his 13-year-old son on leg day.
I'm not going to apologize for not being on this podcast because I got to go see Metallica. So if that's a problem, kiss my ass. Okay? All right.
All right, everybody, this is In Liberty and Health, episode number 186. Today, I have Miss Meredith with me. We met off of the great Twitterverse. Anyways, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you? I just realized my last name's up there. So
they will not see that because I believe I took the names off the video.
Okay,
if not, I should be able to get that out of there.
I try to keep that off my my internet profile just because of what I do and stuff.
Yeah, I in hindsight, I probably should have kept that off of mine, because my dad does own a business, and that we do have obviously the same last name. But I'm thankfully nobody gives a shit about me that much yet to go out of their way to harass people. So yeah.
Yeah, I used to have it up, and when I became a lawyer and people started to actually be like, I'm going to contact the bar association because you're mean or racist or whatever, and I was like, oh fuck, so I took it off.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, I can't really believe people are that fucking petty. It just seems like as we kind of go down the line of more and more government, and this culture war just heats hotter and hotter and hotter, that people just get so fucking dumb about everything. And I'm seeing it from both directions at this point. Everybody who disagrees with you is a demon, or everybody who disagrees with you is a racist, bigot, and a Nazi. I'm just like so fucking sick of this shit. And like, I like a lot of the religious people, and then like I'm starting to meet more and more left-leaning people. I really like these people too. But each side is trying to tell you that you can't be friends with the other side. But I'm like, man, look, I just want to like wear black, play heavy music, talk about political stuff, and talk shit on Twitter. Is that too much to ask for?
It's way too much to ask for in this world, apparently, where everything, I mean, thank God I'm older than you. So I just turned 35. Had the internet been what it was when I was growing up, like now, I would have been unemployable.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff that I did.
Yeah. Do you ever look back at old Facebook posts and think like, wow, holy shit, old Facebook posts, Twitter posts, or anything like that, and just think like, man,
I deleted Facebook for that reason.
Just that bad, you couldn't stand it anymore?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
God,
and I got clowned on recently for some old tweets. And I was like, where I was quoting a rap song and I used the N-word with the A. Mm-hmm. Some people from Black Twitter found it and they were like, what? And I was like, yeah, I guess I shouldn't have done that. Mm-hmm. And they're like, so are you sorry? And I was like, if you personally are offended, I will apologize to you, but I'm not going to apologize to the world. My bad, I forgot I tweeted that.
Yeah, so
I'm not falling for this shit. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah, just this whole you have to condemn things on command is just so ridiculous to me. I was in kind of like a little Twitter, I don't even want to say a debate, but like an exchange with somebody over the Libertarian Party of Florida, and I do find the libertarians in Florida to be rather insufferable, despite the fact I do like a decent bit of them.
Are they? I don't really know much about them.
Yeah, no, you might be better off. Somebody said, "Oh, well, Hector Roos running for governor should be condemned as feckless and something else." And I'm like, I'm not going to condemn this. Like, I really don't care that much. And like, if you guys really think the fucking Libertarian Party is going to steal the election from DeSantis, you're out of your fucking mind. And then look what happened.
I mean, you should see what goes on in California. I don't want to trash us, but we have some real insufferable tendencies over here. So it's hard to even pay attention to what goes on in some of these other shit shows. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have run against DeSantis, but hey, I'm not going to condemn the guy. Go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean,
what are you doing if you're not trying it out, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it to me is ridiculous. But I mean, you know, you're making a message, but at the same time, it's like you realize like this is just going to crash and burn so hard. But you know what? Okay, so you live out in California. The furthest west I've been was Las Vegas. Actually, funny enough, we were just talking off air. I was telling you, I have a picture of my wife and I sleeping with our pit bull 4 years ago. Around that time, actually, about a month prior to that, we were actually out in Vegas, and it's the furthest west I've ever been. What is it like out in California? Is it everything that it's cracked up to be? Is it not everything it's cracked up to be? What has been kind of your experience? As I'm assuming that you're a libertarian because you run in libertarian circles.
Yes.
I haven't quite seen you explicitly say that, but yeah. So what's that kind of been like for you?
Well, so I moved out here in 2002 from Philadelphia. So it was the summer. Yeah, it was summer of 2002, right after I graduated from middle school, which is, you know, junior high or whatever. So, you know, I went into high school in California, which was fine because it was kind of a transition time anyway for people. So it was probably the best time for someone to move. It's very different than Philadelphia. And I really liked it. I mean, the nature and the weather is like, it's hard to, because when I think about like wanting to leave the commie nonsense here, I'm like, oh, but the weather, and you think like, God, that's such a stupid reason to put up with it. But it's like, I wear the same clothes all year round. In the summer, when it gets dark, it gets, you know, cool and you can be outside and it's not crazy. There's not a ton of bugs. Like, I don't know, there's nice things about it. People are cool. There's a lot of transplants in California, so you're meeting people from all over. And I live in the Bay Area, so that's not LA, it's San Francisco area. And there is a lot of wealth here, so you do tend to find in wealthier areas more conservative types, and it's pretty interesting to find those people. But you know, I also went to school, high school it was a private school. I'm one of those. And the people who a lot of people that went to the school came from Berkeley and Oakland. So I fully, you know, have friends whose professors are like, whose parents are professors at Berkeley, you know, hippie as fuck. And I know all of them. And, you know, that's why it's hard for me to fully condemn leftists, because I grew up around them. And I'm like, you know, we totally disagree on politics, but I know them as people before I know them politically. So, and I feel like that's why I get away with some of the things I do in my friend groups now, is because these people knew me first as a person before the politics. So it's hard to fully condemn people like that, because I'm like, you know, they're just misguided. That's all I can really say for that. Like, but it's annoying. It's definitely annoying.
Okay, so
try to avoid it.
Right. One interesting thing that you kind of elaborate upon there. I've gotten frustrated with this, and like before people jump down my throat, because I feel like people are just waiting to call me a leftist at any chance. Like I grew up in fucking blue collar areas, right? I mean, I walked my dogs just a couple of minutes ago and there's Trump flags still everywhere. I've worked for fucking automotive dealerships for 10 years now. So I mean, I know the blue collar base like the back of my fucking hand. My dad's a small business owner. I have a lot of empathy for left-leaning people. Jesus Christ, he's gonna be chewing that fucking toy the entire time.
Okay.
But
I love dogs.
Yes. I see a lot of libertarians and right-leaning people saying the left is the enemy. It's like, okay, well, who do you define as the left? because this is a very, very wide swath of people who, like you said, I think are generally misguided. And when you talk to these people face to face, they don't want you dead. And that's always the fucking just cringy claim I see all the time. They want me dead. When was the last time a Democrat, a fucking like blue collar union Democrat came up to you and said they'd like to see you line up against the wall? Probably never. And I don't think, and I think an overwhelming majority of left leaning people really don't feel that way. They just see inequity and they think that this is a consequence of capitalism and the government that we live under, and they think their worldview solves those problems.
Yeah, I think your general economic leftist, social liberal is more like what you just described. There is a faction of them. It's typically somebody who, if I'm going to borrow their language for a minute, occupies multiple marginalized identities, that they're the ones who will become like, you know, you fucking bigot, not.
Oh, you cut out there. I don't know what.
Put you up against the wall types.
Yeah,
I don't know if you saw Olivia, you know, Olivia Rondo. She had retweeted some guy today being like, I had to tell my parents, my 84-year-old dad or whatever, that if you vote GOP, like you're not allowed to vote GOP if you want me in your life. And then he wrote them an email and like screenshotted it. And it was just sad. And I was like, see, that's the kind of leftist that like, I can't see eye to eye with you, because I don't think that Republicans want gay people dead.
Well, okay, so like to that point, there would be a lot of right wingers that would do the same thing. And I think a lot of right wingers and libertarians want to dismiss that and say that, oh, right wingers are a lot more tolerant than that. But I really don't think that's true, because listen, I work with these people. And if you tell them you vote for Joe Biden, they'd look at you like you have 6 heads. Fuck, like the people I used to work with looked at me like I had 6 heads when I told them I voted for Jo Jorgensen. I mean, I donated to her campaign too. And it's not like I'm absolutely in love with her, but I mean, she's the libertarian candidate that I chose to support. There's just assholes on both sides. And just because one asshole aligns with you more than the other doesn't mean that there aren't, people within this faction that are unreasonable people. I mean, that's not a political ideology thing. That's just an unreasonable fucking person thing.
For sure. It's funny that, because I've never been on the side really that you're on. I've always, because I went from Philadelphia to California. So I've always been like, the girl who's like stands out from the really liberal types. So it's funny whenever I hear a story like yours where you're coming from the other end, it's like it just blows my mind, because I couldn't imagine being in that position. Yeah.
Well, that's why I've kind of enjoyed reaching out to left-leaning people. And like, I went to that Rage Against the War Machine rally, and I got to kind of be really close to a lot of left. Yeah, well, it was really, really cool. So I'm hoping they have more rallies like that. But I just never really got to be around these kind of people. And even like the musicians that I play with, they're mostly right-leaning people, because they're all like, small business owners. They work blue-collar jobs. So even like in the music industry, I don't get to interact with these people a lot. But, it's one thing that you also kind of said earlier is that once again, these left-leaning people face to face. And one thing that plays into that I talk about a lot is this relationship capital. So like you already have built a foundation of like friendship with these people. So they're already more likely to listen to you and hear you out, and then have faith that you're coming at them in a reasonable way and you're not going to undermine their credibility or take them in bad faith. I feel like if we approach a lot more political relationships, or even just relationships in general, that way, then we'll get a lot further, rather than like finger wagging people and telling them that they're an idiot because they're a leftist and a terrible person. Like I can't stand this binary that people fall into.
Yeah, I actually made friends with like an Antifa guy on Twitter that way. Back in like 2017, we talked back and forth for a little bit, being like snipey with each other. And I saw he was from the Bay Area. So I said, "Oh, you're from the Bay. I'll buy you a beer sometime." Back when I used to drink. I'll buy you a beer sometime. And we started DMing, and I was like, "Where are you from?" Blah, blah, blah. And he told me he was an anarcho-communist. And I was like, cool. This was before I was full ANCAP. I've been like a libertarian since probably 2007, but never full ANCAP until more recently. And I said, "Hey, why don't you tell me what's a really great anarchist book or writing?" And he pointed me to Emma Goldman, and that was like Emma Goldman was like a foundational thinker for me becoming an anarchist. So talking to this Antifa guy actually made me get to be more libertarian. And he's a cool guy. I joked with him when he wanted to meet up. I was like, "Actually, I don't know. I don't want you to like bring your friends and like, steal my phone and call me a Nazi, but we never actually did meet up, but we're still friendly. But yeah, I mean, like, that's an Antifa guy. Like, we couldn't be further apart in some ways, but in other ways, we both see the same corruption, the same problems. It's just, and it sounds so cliche to say, but we see the same problems, but we have different solutions. And that's what it is.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that's perfectly okay. And I think at this point we are kind of, I don't want to say up against the wall because that is hyperbolic, but when it comes to like the war stuff, there are no right wingers that know their ass from the hole in the ground when it comes to anti-war stuff. And like, don't get me wrong, I'm grateful that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz are good on Ukraine, but like, if you ask them about China or Mexico now, like, this is a big fucking thing. The fucking, yeah, the little foil with
MTG.
sand, yeah, like her fall from grace has like broke my heart completely because I people bust my balls for going so hard after the right wing, but like, they're just almost there. But then I see this shit, I'm like, this looks like the fucking anthrax letters. Like, you're literally calling for war on the cartels. Like, this breaks my heart to say that, you know, base Q mommy is now fallen out of my favor because she's calling for war with Mexico. Like, you were so good, you were so close.
Yeah, China too. It's funny, like, if you talk to Patrick McFarland, which I know you do, and talk to him about China stuff, it's like, holy shit. Like, even some of the things that, you know, I believed for so long, like, I fully believe the Uyghur genocide thing since like 2017. I was like, oh, you know, the Uyghur genocide, blah, blah. And you have him break it down in like 5 minutes and be like, oh my God, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. But yeah, it's funny because I actually came from more of that neocon life, I guess. I mean, I was like, you know, 18, but it's just, I remember just, and I think for me it was just more of like a joke of like, you know, America, fuck yeah, like back-to-back world champs. Like, that's the kind of reason that I sort of aligned with them. And I never really thought about it other than just being like, well, we're the best, blah, blah, blah. But when I really started studying, particularly the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, that's when I totally flipped. And I was just like, oh, this is not right. Like, and then you really go into realizing, okay, if I'm against taxation, I'm against the military, I'm against wars, because that's how it's all funded. And it just, you have to get there. But it's just amazing the cognitive dissonance with someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who can say, you know, Ukraine is the biggest laundromat of our money at this point, yet she'll be happy to flip that over to China. And it's just like, or Mexico. Yeah. I mean, come on, lady.
Yeah, so I'm not that geographically familiar with California, or actually anywhere in general, because I'm just a fucking idiot. But so I had somebody that follows me on Twitter had mentioned that she said if there were to be violence against the cartels, she thinks that it would get pretty ugly, as in like some of the people who are parts of the cartels would like react very, very poorly to that. So I don't know if you have any experience or if you see that where you live, or like, what are your thoughts surrounding that?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. My second year of law school, I did an internship with a organization here that deals with juveniles on gang probation, typically trying to sort of like say, okay, you're here now, but like, this is how you navigate the criminal justice system, and you're lucky you're here now as a juvenile because we don't want you back here as an adult. Right. And they're fully like clicked up, like north south, all that stuff. That's super real. One of the kids actually, one of the few Southerners we had, ended up getting killed during the program, shot in the head while he was on a swing set. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how deeply those types are connected with the cartel types, but I know, I mean, go to San Diego, it'll take you half an hour to get into Mexico, if that. So I'm sure, especially in Southern California, you know, things get real rough.
Yeah, and you have to imagine that, as usual, what our foreign policy will do is drive people out of their homeland. And it's so funny because they're so hawkish on the border situation. They want to militarize the border, but then you're literally going to do everything you can to get them to come over to our country because, okay, if you don't want immigrants here, that's fine. I I kind of like walk back and forth with this because I understand the argument that like if you're bringing people over who don't share the values that we share, then they're definitely going to vote in a different way. But you know, how many of those people come over here to vote in favor of, you know, policies that you and I would like to see? I don't know. I mean, there's just so much kind of digging to do there. And I think one side's going to say, you know, oh, well, they're all going to vote for leftist stuff and they're going to see that in a good light. And then the other side's going to see it in a bad light. I don't want to say it's somewhere in the middle. I just don't know. But if you go drone bombing the border and starting a war on, you know, the border of Texas and Mexico, you have to imagine that some of those people are going to say, well, I no longer want to be in Mexico because they're not bombing in Texas.
Of course. I mean, and it's like the only reason we didn't get the situation that Europe's in right now with their refugee crisis is because there's an ocean separating us. Right. But you put the situation in Mexico and we become Europe. Go read Douglas Murray, The Strange Death of Europe, and see how well that worked out. You know, I'm super torn on the immigration issue as well. There's part of me that's fully like, people should be able to go have freedom of movement. And then of course my private property brain comes in and we have that issue as well. But I think it's interesting because I think a lot of times we do think of people coming from south of the border, Central America, South America, as voting for leftist policies, but it's so interesting because culturally they're much more to the right. And I don't know if you're familiar, you're probably too young. There's this thing, Prop 8 in California, it was in 2008. It was for gay marriage. I can't remember if it was you vote for it or against it, yes or no, but it was voted down. So I guess it was like not approving gay marriage. And the primary people who voted it down were Blacks and Latinos. And everyone was shook because they were like, what? These are the people that we like, but they're more socially conservative. So it is interesting. I don't know if they are technically always going to be inclined to vote that way, but some definitely are. The Cubans definitely aren't, but they're kind of different.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is that, you know, oftentimes a lot of those cultures are painted homogeneously, but, you know, to me, I don't think it's entirely obvious that every single culture outside of America is like a left-wing culture is going to prefer Democrat policies. Now, I do believe that, people who can get stuff for free and vote for stuff to, you know, get things for free, they're going to do that because once again, it's in their self-interest. But at the same time, you have to imagine that some people are escaping, you know, the tyranny of one country to come to the lesser tyranny that is here. But, you know, when we're talking about tyranny and liberty in these terms, everything's going to be relative to a certain degree. So, you know, tyranny to us would be like freedom to somebody from, let's say, North Korea or possibly even China.
For sure.
So, you know, if these people are coming over here, then perhaps they're looking, you know, a higher standard of living, which may mean them being a little bit more capitalistic, entrepreneurial, or, you know, seeking adventures that would actually raise the living standards of everybody around them. So maybe, you know, immigration in this situation might be a net positive. But once again, that's a lot of nuance that you don't get with the open closed border debate or open or closed border debate.
For sure. And it's funny too, because there is this odd stereotype that comes out and from more people on the right of like immigrants coming here and like, you know, sucking on the teat of the government and they're lazy, blah, blah. And I'm like, you want to see some of the most hardworking people you've ever seen in your life? Go to, you know, a Home Depot and get the day workers and they will do whatever. Like, I think Dave Chappelle or someone had the joke of like, dude, cleaning up 9/11, give it to 100 Mexicans and it'll take a day. Like, it's, you know, but it's true. I mean, none of these people, I mean, not none, of course, there's always going to be them, but like the idea of immigrants just coming here for, you know, to lounge around is also very silly. And it's kind of, you know, it's funny too, because I did mention, you know, the Middle East refugee crisis into Europe, but why do you think we're seeing the mass immigration that we're seeing from places like, you know, Guatemala, Ecuador? It's like, you know, our policies for a long time that nobody really likes to talk about did lead to the circumstances being what they are so that people would want to come here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you put embargoes on these countries south of our border, and then you make their standard of living so terrible that once again, they're going to say, okay, well, over there, they're not dealing with the same stuff. So why don't we just go there? And once again, the right wingers start put two and two together. Why don't we just leave that country the fuck alone, so that way they can rebuild? And if they want to have their communist hellhole south of the border, we have a big enough country, we have enough guns and stuff like that, that if they were to try and invade here, we'll be able to fight that off. It's no problem. And I mean, it's even silly to think that Cuba's going to come up here and bring communism. Like, that's just silly on its face. But
this just reminded me of,
sorry.
This just reminded me, I wanted to ask you because where are you on it? Just, I don't know why this conversation reminded me of Romania, which made me think of Andrew Tate. Because one of the things, like, I'm actually a big fan of the Tates. I got really into them around Christmas time. And I just think it's funny because I think what's being done to them is a travesty, obviously, just in terms of like their human rights and stuff. But I do think it's kind of funnily ironic that Andrew Tate picked Romania because of its, ability to be corrupt with law enforcement, and now he's getting fucked by that corrupt system. But yeah, are you a fan of his?
This may come as a surprise, but I'm actually not that familiar with Andrew Tate.
Okay.
Everything I've heard from him I liked, other than kind of like this polygamous, or the promotion of polygamy. In my mind, and this is actually a good pivot, I'm glad you kind of brought this up because I didn't want to touch these subjects as well with you. I don't think men do good when their women, or the women they want to be with, are polygamous. I think men can do fine with multiple women, and women don't have the same instinct that men do when it comes to like mate guarding, perhaps. Maybe that's not a perfect word for it, but like, we want to know the kid's ours. So if we know that our woman's cheating on us, then that is like biologically drives us fucking nuts. And it took me a long time to accept this, that like, I'm a very jealous person, but maybe I'm not. Maybe it's just my biology says like, that's an existential threat. Your girlfriend talking to another guy threatens your bloodline, right? So, and that's obviously why, my wife like doesn't talk to other guys. Well, actually, the way I kind of worded that altogether, this is like I make her don't do it, but she just doesn't talk to other men, right? That was one. She doesn't demand attention from other people, so that kind of puts my mind at ease in that regards. But what he does promote, like, obviously self-improvement, and then also being sociable and being like good to women and being able to understand intersexual dynamics. I'm totally on board with that, because I do think men dating non-exclusively, kind of like in the way of like just being a more social person, I think is a good thing. Like, if you're going out on dates and you're learning how to interact with women in a positive way, is a good thing. But when you see like these guys on Fresh and Fit, which I do like that podcast, but you take the good with the bad. When you're just clowning women for the sake of clowning women, that's kind of where I get turned off. But like, if you can teach men to operate in, the world today as it stands, where it benefits both men and women, I'm all about that. And specifically in terms of men, just kind of understanding how the cards are for them. So, as usual, I try to tell guys, like, when it comes to the manosphere, take the good, leave the bad, and kind of understand what you want to get out of your relationships.
What's up, everybody? We're going to take a quick break and tell you about the show's sponsors. We are brought to you by LMNT electrolytes. I've been using this stuff for years, and what I've honestly found is that if I didn't have electrolytes before some kind of cardio, and sometimes even before workouts, that my workout performance, or definitely cardio performance, would suffer greatly. Sodium is responsible for every single movement pretty much in your entire body, and let's say you drink a lot of caffeine like I like to do, then maybe it is a good idea, like I do every single morning, put some LMNT chocolate electrolytes there in your coffee to get a little bit more sodium, potassium, and magnesium in your coffee, so that way whatever diuretic effect you get from the caffeine is pretty much diluted by the fact that you put chocolate salt in it. Also, it tastes really, really good. Get some chocolate cream or hazelnut cream or even coconut, and mix that all up. It tastes really, really good. So make sure you drop by, go to drinklmnt.com/inlibertyandhealth and pick you up some electrolytes today. All right, guys, thanks.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because that's kind of like what I said to you when you were talking about doing a podcast. I'm like, I'm a female misogynist, but also sort of a feminist. So like, and that's what I agree with you about you need to take the good of the manosphere, but like don't dive all the way into the deep end, because what I don't like that Fresh and Fit and those types do is that they take your baser instincts, you know, your well, men are programmed to like variety, so I should just expect that I'm a high value man, I'm going to have multiple women and they're all going to be faithful to me, but I'm just going to do it because that's just what it is. And I'm like, okay, but we're not animals. You should be able to know that about yourself. Men like variety, and figure out a way to control that instinct. And this is, I mean, the same with women. Like, women love resources, okay, but you know, you shouldn't go after somebody that you don't like or aren't willing to commit to just for their resources. That's fucked up. And so this is why I don't like, and I hate being one of those both sides people.
Yeah.
But it does kind of come out that way, because I always say, like, just because feminists got super fucking annoying online, especially like the liberal feminists, which is something we can sort of get into if you want the difference between liberal feminism and radical feminism. It's probably not interesting, but because they got super annoying, it turned into every woman who makes a point about sexism or whatever, we can just dismiss. And it's like, no, you can't. There's some stuff that really goes on out there. And the fucked up part is most of the stuff that women want to change about the world is stuff that has to change solely, in my opinion, through interpersonal dynamics and teaching people, teaching your children, teaching whoever you can how to act. These are not things you can legislate. And the problem is people trying to legislate them, people trying to do, you know, quotas for having women, a certain amount of women. Oh, there's only 3 women on the top 100 CEOs. That's wrong. No, that's not how you do it. You can't change the way people behave through legislation. You can, or I mean, you can, but they're not going to change your thinking. They're just going to say, okay, I got to follow this rule, but I really think this. And that's what I think you see a lot online with a lot of younger men these days, men in our circles, men all over the place. There is this sort of hatred of women that is very pervasive and profound, yet they're not going to get called on it because people are so sick of that whiny feminist side that they're sort of letting that shit slide.
Yeah, so like this is kind of where the MRA and feminist debate kind of goes, right? And I know I joke about being a misogynist all the time, but I mean, like, I've never said this publicly on the podcast, but I mean, I literally did 2 benefits for women with breast cancer and gave thousands of dollars to these women to take care of them, right? I mean, my mom had breast cancer 3 times. Obviously, I'm married now. I do love women. That mean a lot to me.
Of course.
But like, the thing is that I also understand that, like, what men seek from women, typically what a man will really want, they're not going to get in women, right? Like, we want women to love us the way that we're expecting them to love us. But the truth is that, you know, we're not wired in that way, right? Like, women, we can't be mind readers. I know this sounds like a lot of just kind of hooey-tooey bullshit, but the way that, like, we want to be appreciated, but women aren't necessarily going to sit here and tell you all the time, oh, good job, honey, you know, you did great. Men do have a burden of performance, right? We are expected to be on top of things. We're expected to lead. We're expected to, once again, bring something of value to the table, right? Women, on the other hand, typically just, you got to be attractive and not complete and total cunt. And even then, you could still typically land a guy. But
I know a lot of cunts, a lot of hot cunts who are
so
wifed up.
Yeah. So, what guys fail to understand is that, once again, you do have this burden of performance. You know, men have to become, women just are. And with that knowledge, you can go out into the world and kind of have that expectation. So that way you can interact with women in a way that's not going to make you resentful of women because you don't understand, like, the base here. And that's what I think a lot of men operate on, is that they don't understand that they have to meet a certain threshold in order to be seen by women. And I think where you and I may kind of butt heads here is that in today's world, because of women's exposure and all the attention they can get and all the access to men, you know, because we do live in a globalized sexual marketplace, men really have to perform a lot, you know, to a much higher threshold in order to be in women's sights. Because, like, the guys who aren't in that, you know, upper echelon, they're just invisible, right? I mean, they're not even, they don't even come on the radar to a lot of women.
No, I actually don't think we've butt heads on that at all. One of the first things that Andrew Tate said that really actually got to me was he was talking to, you know, I think it might have been when he was on Fresh and Fit. I don't remember, because I used to just see the YouTube shorts.
Yeah.
And he said something to the effect of like, you girls will never know true loneliness the way like a guy who doesn't have shit going on. Maybe he works at Starbucks, lives in his mom's basement, or, you know, a studio apartment. Nobody's nice to him because he's a guy. He goes home at the end of the day. He has no prospects. You will never understand that type of loneliness. And I was like, that is 100% real. And it made me a lot more empathetic to when I see guys who might fit that profile in, you know, my day-to-day life, trying to, you know, be nice, be that one person who was nice to them that day. Unfortunately, something that comes with being that guy is being so desperate for good attention that you get it, and then you start to become a creep. So that's not great.
Yeah.
But, you know, you understand where it comes from. One thing I think is interesting about you that I wanted to ask you about, I know it's like I'm interviewing you, but like I find it so commendable and interesting that you said to yourself at some point, I mean, you're like, what, 28, right?
28, yeah.
That you said to yourself at some point, you know, this is what I want in a woman, in a wife, and I'm going to go look for that. And you picked very good qualities, you know. And I'm a little bit older than you, and I don't feel like that was something that the men of my generation were looking for or doing. So I was curious how you got to that point.
Well, that's kind of funny, because I actually did put out a podcast this week specifically on dating stuff, and it was on that one thread that I did. But no, I'm glad to elaborate more on that here, especially with someone of the opposite sex, which, you know, I would typically tell guys not to talk to women or really go out with women on one-on-one. I know that's like an irrelevant thing, but I think what happens, and we can kind of circle this in, especially with the point you were making earlier. The problem is that guys who are lonely, like you were bringing up, is that as soon as they get that little tidbit of attention, they just go to the races with it. And what they don't understand is that romance is a dance, right? Where you kind of have to give a little bit, and then you have to back off. And then you have to make sure that this person's willing to come back. And then, you know, you can kind of meet in the middle. And then, you know, there's a very, very, very nuanced stance that you have to walk, because if you keep going overboard, you know, you're blowing up their phone, you won't stop talking to them, and you can't show that you have better options in subtle ways. Then what do? You think, oh, this guy's a fucking creep, I don't want to fucking talk to this guy. But like the behaviors that or not necessarily the behaviors, well, yeah, to a degree the behaviors, but also the traits I was looking for in a woman were ones that, you know, were statistically more likely to bring about a more a partner that was less likely to divorce me, right? And this also came from my past back in my early 20s, when I was a little bit of I don't want to say womanizer, because it just sounds so cringe, but I was doing a lot of non-exclusive dating and seeing a lot of different people. And through that, I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about other people, and I learned a lot about how to interact with women. And that kind of led me down to finding, you know, my wife, who the story, I do love telling the story, but basically she rejected me a couple times online, and I finally met her in person, and then, you know, 5 years later, here we are.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it just happened she fit the mold of what I was looking for. And one of the things that I would tell people the most is these two things are what stood out to me about her. She wasn't looking for other people's attention, which automatically puts like my mind at ease, because I know she's not looking for other men's attention. I had exes that would do that shit, and it drove me up a fucking wall, like, because that's subliminally telling me that like I'm not doing enough to keep her, you know, to me, like I'm not enough in this regards, which once again is a little bit of a fault of my own. But at the same time, if you're a woman and you're asking for attention from other men, then that's kind of like this whole idea of a soft launch where you're still in the market. And then the second thing would be that the humility. My wife had anger problems at one point. It's incredible to me to see over the years how well she has handled that and overcame it. And,
Oh,
and
that's
like,
awesome.
yes, thank you. Those two things are like the two biggest things. And obviously she's gorgeous and I love her dearly, but like those two things I think really build the solid foundation of a relationship, because if somebody has humility, then they can admit when they were wrong and they can
Yeah.
realize that they know to do better. And yeah, I mean, she just has a lot of great qualities. And the other thing is that we were together a long time before we decided to get married, so there was a lot of time to vet. And that's one thing that I think a lot of people don't do. I think kind of what happens is people just hook up and they assume like, okay, well, we can just run this out. Well, first of all, you should be very careful with who you're having sex with. And I mean, this comes from
Yes.
somebody who did a lot of, that in my early 20s. You should be very careful. And then also really think long and hard about if this is somebody that is a good life partner. You're never going to have like the one, but you can find somebody that you can live the rest of your life with and be happy and have a family
Right.
with.
I feel like when I was growing up, in my teen and early, maybe throughout my 20s, I was always given the impression, and I'm going to sound incredibly cringe here. I have a lot of male friends.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that there are exceptions to every rule, and I'm one of them, and I don't care if that makes me delusional. I have two brothers. I was a very ugly kid I probably still am in my ugly phase. And it's just, I hang out with a lot of guys. So I would internalize the things that I would hear my male friends talk about with about other girls, and say, oh, like if that bitch got pregnant, get her, pay for the abortion, blah, blah. So I had in my head for maybe until I was like 30 that men don't want marriage, they don't want kids, they don't want families, they don't want this stuff. It's best to just be like that fun girl who hangs out with them and will hook up and whatever, they'll figure out eventually. And it's interesting because then you find out that that's not what they wanted, but that's the impression that they always gave off. And I feel like women and men of my generation were sort of failed by the feminist movement having no counter with the MRA shit, because we didn't really have that. And even though I think the MRA shit is stupid, it sort of feels like it helps balance things out, in a way. And I feel like we were done a real disservice. Like, we were led to believe that you should wait until you're late 30. I mean, I'm 35, never been married, never had a kid. I will say I went through years of becoming sober and doing work on myself, no relationships there. So that did, put a gap in my resume, if you will. But I feel like the idea was get through as much of your 30s as you can before you settle down, and go get that baby at 40 like Courtney Cox did, or whatever. And now that I'm like getting older, I'm panicking a little bit, and because of the work I do, I know that that's how you get yourself in really bad situations. So I'm not going to be that girl, but like, it is interesting because I feel like we were fully lied to, and it's messed a lot of women in my generation up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
and
just,
men.
so from the outside looking in, I would definitely agree that women they're very, very misled, because I think, and I hate to go full purple pill trad con and say that like you should have kids younger, but honestly, I think that's probably the better idea, because like, I worked with somebody at the last dealership I worked at, and actually somebody that I work with now. They had kids when they were like in their, I want to say late teens, early 20s, and now the one dude is in his early 40s, and all his kids are in their 20s, and now him and his wife, they still look great, they're happy, and they have all sorts of stuff, and it's like, okay, well, now they have like the last half of their life to be with each other and really enjoy that. But there's also the nuance of like, well, in today's world, it is a lot harder to do things on a single income, which like breaks my heart, because I want people to live this socially conservative life. But what I'm sure you can empathize with this as well, that like our parents don't understand necessarily the same struggles that we face, because like they got to grow up with a lot of this technology boom and like the rapid increase in the standard of living. Now, granted, it was kind of like blunting up until the early 2000s, but like people our age, we're not afforded that same, like,
no,
we don't have the same quality of life. Like, my wife is going to have to work. Obviously I'm going to have to work. So like, we're not going to be able to have somebody to stay at home at all times. So like, our to be traditional going forward is just so much more difficult for people kind of our age. And I think even for people younger than us, you're going to have to make a lot of sacrifices. And that's going to mean, I mean, there's going to be generations of kids that are not going to have the same link with their parents. And it's like, how the fuck do you stop that?
I mean, it's so crazy because I'm like one of those people who can diagnose a problem, but then I still am the problem. So like, if people didn't live such materialistic lives, perhaps you could live on a single income, but I love stuff. I love to shop. So like, I can't really talk, but I mean, most of my clients, if the wife stops working, it's only for when the baby's real young. Most of the situations where they set up their marriage to be the stay-at-home mom, and raised on a single income, those are the ones that end up in a very messy divorce because there is a shitload of resentment that gets built up. And not only resentment, but there's resentment from the woman, and there's resentment from the man that she's not able to go and get a job as fast and support herself. But it's like, well, you kept her out of the workforce for 12 years. Think about how much technology has changed. She got to, go get familiar with the computer and all of that stuff now. So it's weird because I know a lot of people, and I think you are one of them, do make the comments about it's more common for the more partners you have. And I swear there's a point here.
That's okay.
The more partners you have, more likely to get divorced. I feel like there's a corollary to that where I do feel like the stay-at-home mom and dad situation does, in my experience, does seem to lead to divorces as well, and bitter ones down the line. Very, very bitter ones.
Okay, yeah, well, I'm actually glad you're pivoting over to this because something else I want to talk to you about. So this to me kind of seems like almost something that we were talking about earlier, where it comes back to men understanding what women can and can't do, right? So, and I like that you kind of pushed back towards the end there about women not being able to get a job and a man being upset that she's still dependent on him. So there's like a lot of nuance here, but I think this kind of boils down to men not understanding that, like, if you're going to have a woman stay home, then it's a thankless job. But then also you as the man being the provider is going to be a thankless job. Like, a lot of this shit is just going to be suffering for your child, which in my mind, a lot of parenthood is. And like, we all want to blow it up like it's gonna be some great thing. But I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of anger, frustration, resentment between two parents that may go unspoken. But then obviously at the end of the day, when your child's grown up, you realize that a lot of it wasn't for nothing, that it was for, the sake of the child. But that being said, I think men have this grand idea that one day their wife or some woman is going to come along and appreciate them and love them the exact way that they kind of envision it in their head. But in my mind, the red pill, the intersexual dynamics, the red pill is in, once again, the manosphere terminology. What that needs to serve as is telling men that that's not going to happen. So once again, you can love women for what they are, not what they could never be. And that is like the biggest takeaway, because if you're under this expectation that a woman can provide you something that she can't provide, then you're holding her in this mental complacency that she can never live up to, and you'll perpetually be disappointed, and she'll be perpetually disappointed. If you understand, what things are from the outset, then once again, you're more of the mind of understanding what she can do and what the situation should be going forward.
Yeah, it's funny because I hate to borrow from this like liberal, use of this kind of overuse of this term, but it's the power dynamics that come into play when you have a situation where you're the man and the wife's stay-at-home mom. And if you were thinking of it like this, she's going off and spending my money. She doesn't do shit all day, but she just gets to stay home. Recipe for disaster. You need to be saying she's going off and spending our money. Because if you really think about it, what I tell people sometimes who are getting in these situations where they're trying to figure out, if they should get a job or stay at home and take care of the kids, I'm like, go look up how much childcare costs. Go look up this, that, the other thing. All right, do the numbers. Does it make sense, or is it better for you to stay home? I don't know. Sometimes it's one way, sometimes it's the other. But I feel as though, and this is where I'm gonna, be a little mean to the men. I feel as though, you guys don't fully understand what women sacrifice when they do choose to take on that role. And you think she's spending all his money, she got half of his money in the divorce. Well, no, it's technically their money because she played a role maybe in the background. It was unpaid. If you really want to, not really unpaid because she gets his money, but it becomes a situation where he would not have been able to do all of that or have the savings he has without her being there and not making it so that they had to go get childcare and all of that. So I think that men need to be a little more cognizant of that when they get into these situations and are bitching about, and also you get in a situation where, okay, now we're split up and I'm pissed off that I don't get to see my child 50% of the time immediately. Well, you were never there. The child's not comfortable with you. Has your wife ever gone away for a weekend and only you had the child? If you've never done that, that's going to be a little scary. So we might need to work up to getting you 50-50. And you kind of need to accept that. If you're setting up your situation where the power dynamic is what it is, don't be surprised when we get into court and you're not getting what you want immediately.
Okay, so, well, yeah, there's a lot there that I want to kind of pull apart there. So this is why I think men and women who get married should have a joint checkings account, right? Because this already kind of starts you off on the paradigm that this is your money together. Because in my mind, if you're getting married, then this is, once again, the idea of a union, right? You're with this person because you believe that you and this other person are one and that you're going to start a family. And this is the most prosperous situation for both you and your wife to be in. So when I see people saying that they're like not joining their bank accounts and not sharing resources, it's very bizarre to me because it's like, well, okay, so why are you leaving your foot in the door there, right? Because that's not what that's not what a marriage is, at least in my mind. And it's the same deal with like moving in and without a plan to get married, because once again, you're leaving your foot open. Or even to give the guys from Fresh and Fit some credit, when women leave their Instagram up and they're posting sexy pictures and but they're advertising, right? Because let's be honest, that's what it is. Instagram is the number one dating app. So when women are posting pictures like that, which once again, my wife never does, it was a huge factor in us getting married, which it sounds silly, but she doesn't advertise because she's mine. Right. I mean, I don't advertise myself.
Important.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, I can't even tell you how many. I wasn't even posting sexy stuff, posting goofy shit with my friends, and you get a guy in there and do a 2-second search on his profile, you see he has a girlfriend, and he's just like, well, whatever. I mean, like the amount of nonsense that goes on Instagram, my God. Yeah. So I think when it comes to kind of this split deal, when you have somebody that's staying at home, then once again, I can't imagine this situation because I haven't been in it, but I feel like a lot of guys do instantly kind of forget that a woman is providing a service and you are paying for the service. And the idea of your union, of your marriage, is that once again, you're accepting this responsibility. Is my dear friend Tommy Salmons put, the husband is the priest of the household. So you are being the priest of the household and you're taking the responsibility because this is your duty, right? So like, as it stands right now, my duty is to provide for my wife and then obviously our 3 dogs, and then me take care of the house and all the bills and stuff like that. And I never, ever bug her about anything financially. She pays her car bill, she pays our phone bill, but like all the house bills and shit like that, that's on me. Taking care of the house stuff, that's on me. Fixing the cars, that's on me. But this is my duty as a husband. So her responsibility as my wife is going to be one day that she mostly raises our children, and then she takes care of the stuff at the house. There's this agreement, mutual understanding. There's a division of labor that once again, we both acknowledge because this is our union. And I think that's agreed to, I'm assuming.
Well, yeah. I mean, once again,
Yeah.
we there's a natural order to things where obviously I do all these tasks, and then if I need help with something like that, she's willing to do it too. But like, we understand our primary responsibilities.
Oh, I'm
and
just
that's
saying, I
that.
feel like
Yeah.
people don't have that conversation with
Yeah.
people, and I feel like that's one of the things that they should do.
Mhm.
And before you decide to marry someone, to say like, this is what I envision this looking like. Is that something that is compatible with your vision or
Mhm.
whatever? Because again, basically, the nature of what I do, I'm a divorce lawyer, is seeing a lot of situations where I'm like, how did you end up in a relationship with each other? Like, you
Mhm.
two? That doesn't make sense. And I think that's one of the things, again, I think is admirable about you, because you've said before, you had what you were looking for in your wife. You met the one who checked those boxes. I feel like a lot of people don't actually do that, and they just sort of fall in. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think people just sort of fall into relationships, and they stay together for a certain amount of time. All of a sudden, they're like, I guess we should get married. I don't know, and that's why you see such a high divorce rate.
Yeah. And I mean, divorce is just like the fucking worst thing on the planet. I mean,
Terrible.
it's awful to see how people who once had such a bright and like happy life together go down such a miserable path. And especially when it gets to the point where it's financial. And the way I always heard it explained, I wish I could remember who said it, but when it comes to divorce court and alimony for a man, it's like being drugged behind a truck, and it stops when she says it stops. It's just to think about a situation like that, it's just so awful, because like, when you marry somebody, you understand, and you should always remember, like, I was thinking about doing this gay thread on Twitter, but I didn't. But I can remember the moments. I had 2 margaritas the day that I was going to get married, and funny enough, my wife did too. And I remember counting seagulls while I was waiting for her to walk down to the beach, so then we would say our vows. And I'll never forget that as long as I live, for obvious reasons. But like, those are the moments that you should remember when you're with somebody, and that's what you should focus on, is like the highest state of being and prospering like that. And even like through all the bad times, and obviously my wife and I have like little times where we butt heads, but we never like scream and shout. But once again, this is about the humility. You should remember those moments. And like, I don't know, it's just the idea that one person would go after another person's income and rake them over the coals for an extended period of time. It's like, man, you guys really lost the plot if this is where you feel it's necessary to be. But kind of to your point earlier, I understand why people would go down that path when you enter this union, and then you're foggy on the details, and then one person, you end up having a kid, and then you never ironed out the details, but all of a sudden now one person is without a job and has to stay at home. And then, things get rough, or you decide you don't want to work it out, which in my mind, you should always work it out no matter what. Now one person's left at an extremely economic disadvantage.
Yeah. I definitely, it's fucked up, because if I think about, for me, like, giving away a portion of my income, holy fuck, I would be so mad. Yet I make people do it all the time. And it's fucked up. It's hard to reconcile sometimes. Like, there was, God, like when I first started being a divorce lawyer back in 2014 or so, I was like always on the side of, my clients are in the right, I believe everything they tell me. And it took me like maybe a year and a half or so to be like, God, I could have been that other person's attorney.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a little break from the show real quick to tell you about the show's sponsors. I am now working with the great Stephen Fox to bring you Fox & Sons coffee. As you can see, I got 2 bags right here, or for those listening, I was holding 2 bags. It is organically roasted up in Michigan. If you're a caffeine addict, much like myself, then head over to foxandsonscoffee.com to get yourself some of their fantastic coffee. They got a light roast, which I'm holding in my hand. They have the Electric Boogaloo blend, which is fantastic as well. I just had it this morning. And if you're like me, you like dark roast coffee, which kicks you right in the freaking face first thing in the morning, they have that for you as well. So head over to foxandsonscoffee.com, use code Kyle, Kyle, to get yourself a little discount. Let them know that I sent you, and get yourself caffeinated, get jacked and tan, and do what you got to do. All right, guys, back to the podcast. Thanks.
and then I would have had to represent them, and I wonder how they feel. Like, you know, and it's funny now that, because I've had times, I think I've talked about this with Tyler Yunke, I've had times where I'm like, God, I understand why your husband hates you. Or like, I'm on his side now. You know what I mean? Because it's just, there's so many things that I've had clients do that I would never ever want to do. But I guess you have to realize, you have to try to put yourself in those shoes and realize all the things that happened that got them there. And somebody, I was listening to some chick on some podcast, she was going through a custody thing, and she was saying, like, you know, we wouldn't spend all this money on lawyers and time in court if we didn't fully feel like this is what we had to do. And I'm like, that's true to a sense, although, you know, sometimes your sincere belief is wrong. But if you look at it from their perspective, they believe it. So it's kind of tough. But that's just, I don't know. I always think about that. Like, God, if somebody had to take, you know, half of my income every month, I would freak the fuck out. I would be so mad.
Yeah. My grandfather was divorced 3 times, and and I've seen, you know, people that I work with go through divorces and them saying, like, I'm losing thousands of dollars every month. It's fucking horrible to think about just the situations that people put each other in. And I think a lot of this could be prevented if, like, people were much more intentional about their relationships, as my wife and I were. And once again, this isn't to pat myself on the back, and I appreciate the compliments, but, like, I knew how ugly divorce can get from listening to the MRAs and people like that. And that's not to say that you should, like, sit there and dwell and live in that sphere, but, like, listen to the ugliest shit you can, so you realize that hell is a bottomless pit, and that there's nothing that you could do that wouldn't make it worse. You should be very, very careful with who you choose to spend the rest of your life with. And when it comes to having sex with somebody and the potential to have a child, I'm pro-life as it gets. Be very, very conscious of where and what you're doing. And it's pretty damn hard to get somebody knocked up, but, like, you should still be very conscious about that. And I can't hammer the point enough. When it comes to a long-term relationship, just, spend some time with this person. Make sure you see what they're like when they're mad, when they're not doing too well. Do they speak well of you to their peers? Do you speak well of them to your peers? Do you two recognize each other's faults? Like, just some obvious stuff that I think people just get so hooked on the high of meeting somebody new, and they don't consider these things, and then later on they may come back to bite them in the ass. Like, none of this stuff is ever for me to pat myself on the back and say how good of a job I did. It's just like, hey, I want to hold up a mirror and say, like, are you thinking about this stuff before you go down this path? Because I don't want to see people end up as your client. No offense.
No, of course. Trust me, by the way, I've gotten to the stage where when I have that initial meeting, I'm like, hey, if you can do this without me, you should do it without me. Like, if you guys can figure out a way to do this, like, don't waste your money. Not that it's a waste. I'm just saying, like, if you don't need a lawyer, try to do it without one, because it's a lot, and that you will never see it again. That money is gone. I just think it's so cool that you had the maturity to do that and date with intention like that. It's something that I wish I had learned a very long time ago, and I'm sort of like learning it now later in life. And I wonder what my life would have been like if I had known the things that I know now back then. I think things would have been a lot different, but I do think it's cool. I think you're a little more unique. Even though I do think that people growing up now are getting more of this information, I don't think as many of them, because I still see all those fuck boys and fuck girls on Twitter and Instagram, OnlyFans. Everyone's got a fucking OnlyFans. And the Instagram, again, I'm like 80 years old. The Instagram is a nightmare.
So what has kind of been your experience with dealing with divorce court? Because you touch on it a little bit, and I know you and I kind of went back and forth a couple of times, because to me it does seem like men just get completely fucking annihilated time in and time out. And from what I understand, the stats are, I think it's like 91 or 89% of alimony cases go to women. And it's for some of the reasons that you're laying out, which I
Right.
think are reasonable. But at the same time, it does seem like some women do kind of take the alimony court for a ride, and they just grind men into the ground. And like I said, I've seen this firsthand with what this does to guys. And I do believe there's two sides to every story, but also, you know, it is really fucked up to just take a dude for everything he's got, because once again, this at one point was the husband, this at one point was the father, or is the father of your child. We should try and treat that with some kind of dignity and respect.
Absolutely. I think part of my opinion on this is colored by the fact that I do live in California, and California has made it a priority in their statutes and everything to be as gender neutral as possible. Like, I know that's probably the goal everywhere, but California, it's very strict.
Mhm.
So I do believe that, I mean, I have seen several, not many, of course, several cases where I have the wife paying the husband alimony and child support. I will say it's definitely not as many, although I do think that this is a trend that is changing and will continue to change. Because, I mean, you go back into, like, you know, the 70s, women weren't allowed to have their own credit cards in their own name, you know, so it takes time for these things to change. There's like the Women's Property Act of 1979 in California, where it was finally like you can own your property and all of that. So it is taking time to change. There's more men paying spousal support than women. Again, though, for the reasons that I stated. You actually said something that made me think about this a lot once. I don't even remember who you're talking about, but you said to me on Twitter something to the effect of, if you quit your job, you can't expect severance or whatever.
If you quit being a wife, then you shouldn't expect to be paid at, you know, as still being employed as a wife. Yeah. Right.
The thing that I think, and I think a lot of men do think that way, and that was kind of the most interesting. Sometimes you need to have an analogy put to really get it.
Yeah.
One of the things I think that men, a lot of the men, especially who think that no fault divorce is really bad, don't consider is what led to the divorce. They think, oh, without abuse or something like that, who cares? And I'm like, man, you should see some of the cases that I have in front of me that have no physical abuse, but I can't believe the woman stayed as long as she did. And, you know, I see the evidence. I see pages of text messages and pictures and all this stuff. And I'm like, wow. So she finally, the point of no fault divorce, again, was so that you're not trapping someone in a relationship, and they don't have to be trapped because they don't have the money.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want some woman to be trapped in a relationship she doesn't want to be in just because she's destitute? That's sort of where I come back to it. But I did think that was a good point in general that you made. If you're just somebody who's like, fuck it, I don't want to be married to you anymore, I'm sick of you, and then you want spousal support, that I think is silly. But I think you gotta, you know, there has to be a little bit more nuance. But I did take your point on that. I thought that was an interesting one. Okay,
so I guess the one area where I'd push back, and I'm more on the side of, I think no fault divorce is a net negative. And people jumped down my throat. I'll never forget the backlash I got on Twitter when I went back and forth with Sarkis over the step parent thing. But
that was one of my favorites.
Oh my god, yeah, that is a hornet's nest that I will kick anytime, but you know, only when I have
very
free time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
First of all, I didn't know that cuckold included a stepfather until somebody linked it to me. I was like, no way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people don't like to hear
Shocking.
that, but yeah, and like people interpreted that me as saying like I'm saying that all stepdads are bad people and it's immoral. I don't think cuckoldry is immoral. I'm just telling you what retroactively this is. This is, once again, one of the things. This was a big thing for me. I would not date a woman who has a kid. It's just because it seems to me, and people can throw stones at me all they like, but guys who date women with kids, they don't have any better options, because women who have kids bring a lot of baggage to the relationship. You're bringing a baby daddy, you're bringing kids, and then now this guy is going to have to pick up for that kid that's not his. And not only that, kids are so much more likely to be abused when it's a step parent, which is tragic, but I mean, that's just the truth. I'm not going to put myself in that situation. Anybody who knows me knows I'm about as calm as the day is long. but I refuse to put myself in that situation because it's not fair to the kid. And once again, I wouldn't want anything to happen. I mean, it's essentially step parents are this whole situation with no fault divorce, and I think normalizing step parents actually leads to a lot more abuse and rape of children than it would otherwise. Which and people are going to take this out of context and say that I'm saying all step parents and all this is rape.
Not all.
Yeah, but it does lead it opens that door a lot more because now you're allowing predators to get easier access to children. So I know it's a long tangent, but basically my pushback would be in no fault divorce, the problem is, why are you marrying somebody that would kind of be in that situation in the first place? Because it kind of seems like people, once again, they're not actively understanding what they're doing. You're not consciously engaging in your relationship and observing this person's behaviors. So you end up in a situation that really fucks you. And I understand not everybody's perfect, so I'm just going to slip through the cracks. But like, this is why the decision to get married or be in a relationship with somebody is a big fucking deal. And you should not be a fucking moron about it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I fully agree with that. I just think on a level, it's impossible to expect people to be smart. So, you know, I don't want people stuck in relationships that they don't want to be in. However, I'm not saying that no fault divorce has been a net good for society either. Okay. Sure. I definitely don't think that. But it's ultimately, it comes really down to state involvement. And do I want you to be trapped in a relationship that you can't get out of if you don't want to be in it, but there isn't something that a government tells you is sufficient enough for you to get out of it. I don't want the government to say, I only have evidence that he pushed you into a wall, but he didn't punch you in the face. So you have to say, you know what I mean? I don't think that's right. But I do think it has led to people getting divorced very flippantly. Absolutely. And yeah, I don't think that's good. One of the first cases I had was a marriage that was 3 months. And I was like, what the fuck was the point of this, man? Like, you know, so I don't think it's been a net positive, but I don't necessarily think it's more negative than the other option. I think, you know, what's it, Thomas Sowell, he says there's no good or bad, there's trade-offs or something like that. It's a trade-off type of thing. But I definitely get why men feel a certain way about it, because if I'm going to put on what I think they're saying, and you can tell me if I'm right about this, is, you know, the woman chooses to leave me for no good reason other than she just doesn't want to be married to me anymore. She doesn't like me anymore, whatever. And then I'm going to get fucked. I don't get to see my kids. I got to pay her. I got to lose all this shit. And I didn't want this. Is that sort of what it is?
Now, by I don't want this, do you mean like, as in like the guy didn't want that whole situation, or? I
didn't want the divorce. She just walked out for whatever reason, and now because she wanted this for no good reason in my mind, and I have to, you know, suffer all these consequences.
Right. I think when that happens to men, I feel like, and I'm almost gonna sound like fucking Jordan Peterson or Matt Walsh, there's almost like almost like you do have, once again, to bring it back to a point I made earlier, you have a burden of performance, right? If I were to stop going to the gym and start calling off work, stop getting up at 4:30 and doing what I have to do every single day, my wife would lose attraction to me, right? I wouldn't be the same person that she married. So I think a lot of guys, this kind of encircles our whole conversation, is that men have this burden of performance, and I think that they fail to understand that, and they don't understand that women are looking for that, and whether they say it or not, they're looking for it. And you need to understand that. And once again, this is your duty as a guy, and especially as a husband, that you're going to be expected to perform certain things and be consistent in these regards. Now, obviously nobody's perfect, so on the other side would be that women need to understand that for men, it's very, very difficult to maintain this and not garner fatigue and need some kind of support. But once again, your default state as a man is that you're going to have to struggle. And the machine's not built to be content. So even when, everything's going good, you hit that PR, which I've done it, deadlifted 500 pounds, no problem. You're going to want to lift more, right? That's what happens. So you kind of have to just understand that, once again, as a guy, you have this burden of performance. But once again, when it comes to no fault divorce, women have a lot of incentives to leave, and that should always be included in the conversation as well, is that a woman will still get paid as a wife if she chooses to no longer be a wife, whereas the husband will have to perform no matter what. And there's no upside for him. Basically, what we've done in modern society is that we've put all the responsibility on men, but gave them 0% authority. So, what is 100% or 100% responsibility with 0% authority? It's basically slavery, because the man has no decision in the marriage, because he doesn't have the same legal counsel and social constructs built around the court systems that women do. So this is where, kind of, once again, it goes back to the burden performance, is that a woman being attracted to a man and understanding that he is kind of the leader in the household, and her being okay with being in that frame is very, very important. And then when you lose that, and when you start slouching and you start slacking, then I think that's kind of when the door opens up. And then when a woman feels more incentivized to leave, because she realizes that you're not doing your duties as a husband anymore. So I know that's a lot, and there's a lot of nuance in there, but that's kind of like how I see it.
Wait, so it's so interesting, because when you say the burden of performance, you lay out things that are objectively, that's a lot of responsibility to meet. And a lot of, I'm going to sound like a traitor to my gender today when I say this, but a lot of men are just like, hey, just don't get fat. And I'll stay married to you. And as somebody who has struggled with weight her entire life, I'm like, that's really hard. But to you, when you guys have all of these other things that you have to meet, it doesn't seem that hard to just be like, not become a fat ass. But it is funny. I wonder, let's say, you are holding up your end of the bargain, and not you, because your beautiful wife, I'm not going to say she's going to get fat, but some other guy married some hot little thing, and then she got fat. Do you think that guy is justified in ending the marriage because of that? Or should they try to, he should try to get her to work out? Or, because I have several cases where the guy's like, yeah, I cheated on her because she was fucking fat.
I mean, perhaps my perspective is a little bit different, because I'm a certified personal trainer, and health and fitness is kind of my thing. But obviously, if there's an issue, then you need to bring that up. And then you can't be an asshole and just be like, well, quit eating fucking pizzas, lard ass.
Yeah.
You don't have a right to just up and divorce him. But at the same time, the expectation is that, hey, we got married because you're a beautiful woman and you're going to be the mother of my children. That's all I'm expecting of you. If I'm providing and I'm holding up my end of the bargain, then I expect you to do this. So that does not make it right to cheat. Now, there are people in open relationships, and once again, as long as it's an explicit thing and you both have the understanding that hey, we're entering an open relationship. I don't think I could tolerate that.
Me either.
And I don't think my wife would tolerate that well either.
Can I just say, I think I can think of one or two exceptions. Every poly person I know is not attractive.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that?
Yeah, pretty much every time I see swingers or people like that, I'm like, man, I don't know who the fuck you're getting to swing. Yeah, I don't know who's swinging with you, but I'll tell you, me and my wife are not on the market in that respect.
It's just, I don't know if it's attractive people have more self-esteem or what. I'm not sure, but I just think, because I know some people out there in the libertarian sphere who are swingers and are good looking. I'm just saying they're not the typical ones I see, but
yeah. Yeah, I definitely don't think it would be right to divorce somebody just because they got fat. I think it would kind of be the same deal as if you feel you're having problems that you can't solve between you and your significant other. You should go start doing training. And it's funny because my dad's actually started consulting me about losing weight, which is just really, really strange to me. But it's not hard to lose weight. It
can be.
It's simple, but it's not hard.
So I have a little bit of a different.
Yeah, it's simple, but it's not hard. Right. So basically the way that I always try to start it out is okay, so we're just going to try to get you to opt in for better foods. That's all. We're going to start right there. Let's try to get you to weigh yourself 3 times a week, just so that way we kind of have like an average. And then if the scale's trending down, good. Just keep doing what you're doing. Don't track. Don't worry about protein. Don't worry about anything. Just try to opt for better foods. Don't drink calories. Don't, just try to make a little bit of a conscious effort. And then, if the scale starts to, if you stop seeing progress, then let's kind of push it. Let's see if we can change the dial on something else, maybe get you to do a little bit more activity, see if that gets it to budge. Just kind of work with somebody, because at the same time, if you're in a union, then it's going to be work, right? The same deal is, if my wife once again need personal training or anything like that, she works out. I'm here for her. You're there for your partner because it's, till death do us part. So some of that's going to be problems and struggles. So it is part of the woman's end of the deal that I think that they stay attractive, or at least to the best of their ability, and do the duties that they essentially agreed to do, the same way as it is for a man to do his end of the bargain. And that's not to say, once again, you have to be 100% of the time, but your responsibilities.
It's just funny because when you actually lay it out like that, it seems like the man has so much more of a burden to meet than the woman. And I'm like, yeah, man, if you really think about it, it's just funny. Like, I feel like in some ways I was lucky to have experienced, struggles with weight early on in life and throughout life, because I know a lot of women who never struggled with their weight and then had the one kid, and they're all of a sudden it's like, what? So it's like, I know that when I get a certain way, like, I know how to lose weight, and some of these women are like, I don't know, should I do keto? And I'm like, oh my God, no, I don't believe. I know you're similar to me in the sense, I don't believe in those like elimination diets unless you have like an allergy or something. You're like that too, right?
I'm very, very dogmatic when it comes to diet. I did carnivore for 2 years, and like, I struggled with my weight for probably most of my life, honestly, until I was funny enough, until about 6 months or so after I met my wife, that it finally because she has a gluten allergy, right? So that was kind of like the first drop in the bucket of, oh, hey, maybe this nutrition stuff matters. I'd only been working out for 5 or probably 8 years prior, but I had these digestive issues and probably what was depression, but I was never formally diagnosed.
Right.
And then I did carnivore, and I just kept binging and stuff like that. And then eventually got beaten into my head that, like, hey, generally, as long as you're eating decently, and not even like that, like, as long as you're not just eating way too much, you're probably going to be okay. Right. Artificial sweeteners, study after study after study comes out, they're benign. They change the gut, but nobody knows if that's good or bad. The saturated fat stuff, as long as you're not eating like bacon and fatty ribeyes and fatty brisket for every single meal, every single day. Yeah, they're delicious. But as long as you're not just like dousing everything in butter and eating the fattiest cuts of meat for every single meal and eating sugar all day, you're probably going to be okay, right? So that's like pretty much like the main advice. Like, just try to get a little bit more protein, eat lots of fruits and veggies, eat lots of leaner meats, and you're probably going to be pretty good. And like, sugar, not bad for you. Seed oils, not bad for you. It's just
seed oils.
Oh my God.
It's getting really
yeah.
It sucks because like, you're in really good shape. I am not. I'm in good athletic shape, but I'm not like I'm not thin. So like, it's funny because I've educated myself over the years on all of this stuff very intensely because I like to learn, because I'm a nerd, and also because I've had to deal with it. And it's just funny because I want to give these people, I'm like, no, you're wrong, but they're like, oh, well, you're not skinny, so what do you know? And I'm like, you don't have to be skinny to read a fucking study, but it's just funny. I think calories in, calories out is the only diet advice people really need.
Yeah. I try to avoid saying that, not that it's wrong, but that, like, when you tell people that, it's not really helpful, because I see some people say, like, what's the best way to lose weight? And they'll just say calorie deficit. I'm like, well, the question they're asking is, what should I do to lose weight?
Right.
When you just shout caloric deficit at people, and I'm not saying you do this, but like, I've seen other people do this. I'm like, it's just such a shitty thing to do, because it doesn't help.
They'll just say, eat less, move more. And it's like, well, hold on.
Yeah, what does that mean? Nobody knows what that looks like.
Right.
So that's why, once again, we don't make huge changes. If I tell you, you got to work out 6 days a week, you have to walk 10 minutes a day or a half hour a day, preferably after a meal, and then, hit each month. Yeah. If I lay all these, you're not going to do it. You may do it for a week or two, but then, you're not going to comply. So that's why, once again, with my dad and with other people, you give them hey, just try this, weigh yourself, and let's see where it goes. If you're in the right direction, keep doing it. Don't change a thing. But once again, as soon as things start to stall out, then let's adjust the knobs. And then now something that I've also kind of dug in a little bit on, and people can refer to, I think it's episode 140 or 141 with Dr. Bill Campbell, where we talked about deloads a little bit. I start to tell people do deloads, diet breaks, because a lot of the research is coming out about that. The slower you lose the weight, and if you take diet breaks, so this is basically like a week at maintenance, that decreases a lot of like the mental and actually like your I don't want to say your metabolism's fatigue, but like you'll actually maintain
adrenal.
You'll maintain more muscle, you'll maintain a better metabolism if you actually take these diet breaks. So a lot of people just want to crash diet, but like if you lose the weight slowly, you're more likely to keep it off. If you take diet breaks, you're more likely to keep the weight off, and you'll keep more muscle. So like when it comes to training, there was a study done where basically like, and they fucked up the design of the study in my mind, because like they had people work out for like 3 weeks and take 2 weeks off, when most people deload for like anywhere from like a week to 10 days.
Right.
So basically what they did is they had people work out for like, I think it was 6 months straight, and their progress was pretty linear, and then started to like taper off towards the end. The people who were deloading, they actually made the same progress by the end of the study, and they were taking 2 weeks off at a time. Yeah. So once again, that tells you that it's important to fucking deload. And Bill Campbell has published over 200 studies from the University of Florida. And he says, yeah, I take a week off every 4 weeks. So, I mean, this dude, like, he's like the guru on basically like getting people into like almost contest prep shape.
Yeah. I had a time after my freshman year of college, I lost, I think like 75 pounds over a summer. And guess how I did that? I'm 5'9". I'm not going to say what I weigh, but I went down to 1,000 calories a day. God. Way too little. Yeah. Lost a shitload of weight. Body didn't look that good. Like, body looked smaller, but it didn't look great. And I ended up putting, the weight back on. Even eating very little, exercising like crazy, because my body was like, okay, we are operating on 1,000 calories a day. We are used to that now. So we don't have the energy. You add in a little bit more calories and we're like, cool, like body store fat. It. Yeah. So I always tell people that too. I'm like, you need to, because I had a period of time after I started working as a lawyer where my PCOS got out of control, and I put some of the weight back on, and I went to my old trainer, who's a professional bodybuilder, IFBB and all that, MPC, whatever the fuck, NCP, whatever, I don't remember. And he was like, okay, well, we're just going to do this. Go to 2,100 calories and just come work out with me 3 days a week. Dude, I lost 25 pounds in like a month, and I've kept it off, and, a little bit more than that, 3 years now. And I haven't been going to the gym as much. I need to get back in there. COVID fucked me up. But like that weight I've kept off without really trying. You know what I'm saying? So like but the weight that I worked, with a starvation diet to get off came back so easy.
Yeah.
And without even like overeating, eating normal.
Yeah. So the way that this kind of happens is that your body, think of it as like a thermostat. You have a certain, what's called a body fat set point. And it's just a theory, but yeah. So basically,
I believe it.
Yeah. So do I. If you get to a certain point, like right now, this shape I'm in now is kind of like my body fat set point, right around like 190 to 195 pounds. It would take pretty drastic dieting to get me below. Like I've been as low as 179 and I felt horrible. But once again, my body fat set point wasn't that I could maintain that. Now, at one point, my set point was 250 pounds, right? So it took a pretty drastic change to get me down. And then at a certain point, I was kind of stuck in like the 210-ish range. And then once again, intervention all the way down to 180s, and now I'm kind of floating around 190. And that's just because your body's going to eventually settle at a point that it's going to say, okay, well, this is the weight that I'm happy at, and this is the weight that I can work with the best at. and people once again will crash diet, but what happens is what I'm doing right here is what's called non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This is actually the majority of the calories that you burn every single day is through activity like this. Very little is it actually from the thermic effect of feeding, which is from like fiber or protein, and then also like your physical activity. Like I think physical activity is like 20%, but an overwhelming majority is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So when people's metabolism crashes, they stop moving around as much involuntarily. Right. Like you can't just get it back up without extreme conscious effort. So like instead of getting up to go get the remote and turn on the TV and then sit back down, you'll just sit down and not turn on the TV. That's basically what happens. And people don't realize that, but like your body's not fucking stupid. It will find a way to preserve energy if you completely destroy your metabolism.
Totally. I feel like I knew at the time that I destroyed my metabolism. I don't think I realized how badly I destroyed it, because I think it took a long time for me to get to a set point. And I always say, like, my friend, one of my best friends, she's does, like, she teaches group fitness classes. She's moving around all day, but she doesn't eat that much. And I'm like, that this is her set point. Her body's used to this level, because like she's also not losing weight, but so people develop these set points where they're used to this level of activity, this level of calories, and we're going to maintain. And I feel like people never want to go for that maintenance phase, which I feel now, after all the different times I've lost weight in my life, the maintenance phase is super duper important, because I don't feel like you can get back on a losing trend until you've spent some time at maintenance.
Yeah, well, obviously your hormones, leptin and ghrelin, and I always get these two fucked up when I'm explaining it, but like,
oh wait, leptin is the hunger and ghrelin's the
satiety.
No, it's the other way around. Wait, I forget. Never mind.
Yeah, but basically the point is that like when you're on a diet for so long, eventually you're just going to be very, very food focused and very, very hungry for an extended period of time. So that's why it's actually important to do, let's say, a bulk or a maintenance phase to kind of not necessarily reset those hormones, but kind of get everything back in check, so that way you're not just ridiculously ravenously hungry. But this is what happens with a lot of people who crash diet, is that they binge, and then you can actually overshoot, and you can actually cause fat cell hyperplasia. They observe this in rodent models, where like if you just binge and gain a whole bunch of weight back, and you actually your fat cells can do what's called hyperplasia, and then you can gain more fat cells. And right. And what will happen is you'll actually get fatter than you were prior.
Right.
So that's why I recommend against crash dieting, and try to tell people, once again, just little changes. Let's be patient with weight loss. And then whenever you're never going to get to your dream physique, but you can get to better than where you are today.
Right. And it's funny because people don't fully understand. You are like, when people are like, oh no, weight loss isn't it's just easy for everybody. Well, there is a genetic component. I'm not saying you can blame everything on genetics, but you are born with a certain amount of fat cells. Those fat cells will fill up. If there is spillage, you get what Kyle was just talking about, where you're creating new fat cells, and you can never get rid of them absent a lipo or a cutting tummy tuck or whatever. That's the only way to really get rid of fat cells, is to cut them out. So people should, again, like, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I've gained weight before, and lost it, but if you can prevent it, never get fat, because it sucks. It's really hard. It's not more fun. It sucks. The only fun part is like the temporary fun of eating the shitty food.
Yeah, and I mean, that is it is awesome to eat whatever you want. I mean, I definitely did that on my honeymoon with my wife, and just didn't worry about it. But I mean, at the same time, you have to optimize for the highest quality of life. And at the time, it was just not worrying about my diet. I didn't track anything, and I think I gained 10 pounds, and I've only lost like 5 of that. So, and I mean, it just is what it is. I'm not.
You put it on some water and shit too.
Yeah, well, I mean, initially it was like, I think I was like almost 20 or 30 pounds up, but then, obviously what happens is just a lot of that water weight and a lot of the bloat and stuff kind of wears off over the next couple of weeks. I mean, you'll lose, like, if you go on vacation, a lot of people freak out because the scale will be way higher. I think I left on vacation, I was like 185, and I came back, I was 214 pounds. And then within like a week or so, I was like back into the 190s. So it looks freaky at first, but then, I mean, it goes away very, very fast, especially if you
I got a friend who I have a friend who weighs herself like every day and multiple times a day. And she'll be like, I don't know what I can't. And I still have this 1 pound. And I'm like, I'm sick of just telling her, I'm like, you got to stop it. What are you doing? Like, the scale will move every hour if you want it to. Like, you're crazy. I always tell people not to focus on the number unless you're at a certain level. Just focus on how you look if you can, and take measurements. I always feel like is important.
Yeah. I mean,
but
I weigh
actually-
my. Okay.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's funny because a lot of girls, and I'm not trying to be mean, ladies. I've been there, but a lot of women will say, I've been doing this, I've been working out, and I haven't lost weight, so it must be that I'm gaining muscle. And I'm like, do you know how hard it is to put on a pound of muscle?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying you're not getting more fit. You're increasing, the amount of your fibers that are responding. Putting on muscle, do not rely on that belief here that that's what's going on. Because women, I don't want to get bulky. Again, that's such an insult to the guys out here who are working their ass off to put on muscle. It is hard work to put on even, again, 1 pound of muscle. So, again, I'm a big proponent of lifting. Powerlifting was the best thing I ever did for my body personally. But yeah, women lift. It's so much more fun than cardio. Cardio is dumb.
I like it. All right. Well,
I thought you said you like cardio.
I do like cardio, but not more than lifting, obviously. That's why I always put up videos of my deadlifting, squatting, and everything else.
You can incorporate the cardio into the lifting.
Yeah. I mean, I always recommend every morning I usually do about a half hour on the treadmill at an incline, but I never do running. I used to run a lot. I wouldn't recommend that people do as much running as I used to do. I don't know. I kind of enjoyed running in because there's a bunch of like woods by my house and like trails. There's something beautiful about just going out for a jog in the morning, and there's nothing
Can't
but
do
like
it. I always wanted to, but I can't. Like, people always say, it's how I clear my mind, and I'm like, all my mind is doing when I run is flooding it with like, you're gonna die, can't breathe, I hate you. So it just doesn't work for me.
There's a trail by my house that I used to go run on, and there's a creek that runs beside it, and then all these trees, and like the trees go over top of the trail, and it's just like so peaceful and quiet. And I know there's just like it's so peaceful and like the whole trail's 7.5 miles from front to back, and I used to run that. I used to do it all the freaking time. Every single Saturday morning, I'd get up and head down there around like 6:30, do it, and then come home. Oh, I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Actually, that does sound nice.
Yeah.
I don't live near woods, so but that does sound nice.
Yeah.
Except for the running part.
Yeah. Well, there's lots here in Pennsylvania. I wouldn't recommend, and I only did this once. I would not recommend. I did a 133-hour fast. That was the longest fast I ever did.
Is that 5 days?
Yeah, 5.5 days. Yep.
Jeez.
And I do not recommend on the 5th day going to a trail at 5 a.m. and going running. I did that, and it was dark, and you'll see
Sounds
shit.
Terrible.
I'm not kidding when I say you'll see shit.
Yeah, no, I believe it.
Yeah, so we've been shooting the shit for like an hour and a half. I really enjoyed this conversation. I enjoy all the rabbit holes that we went down. There was no specific target at the beginning of this chat, but like I said, I think people are really, really going to enjoy this. I know I definitely did, and we'll definitely have to do it again sometime. Meredith, where can everybody find you? What do you got going on? That's cool. And are you going to be taking on like the next OJ Simpson or anything like that?
No. I'm at Fletch Her Cox on Twitter. Haha. And I'm on Instagram, but I don't really post on Instagram. I'm not doing anything that interesting. I'm in the California LP Mises Caucus. Anybody, want to come out, hit me up. Good friends with our new chair, Adrian Malagon. If you want to find him on Twitter, he's out there. And we're trying to do big things now that we've completed the Mises takeover in California. And also no banning pit bulls.
Yes. I wish my pit bull was up here right now.
Rule.
Yeah. Fuck all the Pitbull haters. So
fuck Matt Walsh. I'm over him.
Yeah, well, fuck Matt Walsh and all the Daily Wire people, because they said Michael Knowles had said I know some people like him, but we should obviously kill all the pit bulls. And I remember Phil Labonte from All That Remains had tweeted at him and said, come and try. And somebody said, oh, you're one of those people I heard about. Like, I can't remember what the person said. And he said, no, I'm one of those gun nuts you heard about. I was like, yes. So, yeah.
Yeah. Pit bulls rule. They're the best dogs in the world. Fuck everybody.
Yeah, I agree completely.
I'll let my dog eat you.
Yes. Well, my dog would probably lick him to death. If anything, Yeah. She doesn't have a mean bone in her body. All right. Well, Meredith, we'll call her quits there if you don't got anything else.
No. Good
Awesome.
talking to you.
Yeah, of course. Well, we'll definitely do it again. I really appreciate your time. And until next time, everybody, make sure you go check out these show's awesome sponsors, tigerfitness.com, the world's best electrolytes as well, drinklmnt.com/in liberty and health, and Fox & Sons Coffee. Use code Kyle at checkout. I probably should have plugged that at the front, but that's okay. Until next time, everybody, thank you for listening. Leave reviews and take care.